Welcome everyone to your DevLearn 2020 Call for Proposals Q&A. I'm Bianca Woods.
I'm Mark Britz.
So we're on the programming team, which has nothing to do with computer programming and everything to do with event programming. So we are two of the three people who will be reading all the proposals and working on curating the mix of sessions that go onto our conference programs. So in the spirit of wanting to be really open and wanting all of you to be able to create the best proposals possible, we wanted to have this live event and have a bit of a chat, give some of our tips, answer some of your questions. We are, because there's a lot of people in here, asking people to put the questions in the chat and we will get to them. So as we get started, Mark, do you have any personal tips about what you like best in proposals?
Oh, yeah. Well, Bianca knows this because I get all giddy about it. I love case studies. I mean, that's my thing. I love hearing stories of real work in the workplace, things that are going well, that tell a deeper story behind why a solution was chosen, you know, what that context was. I think that speaks to a lot of people. That doesn't necessarily mean every case study makes it on because Mark likes it. But at the same time, there's a lot of power in case studies because people can really connect with that context and look at their own set of tools and processes and situation. That's one of my faves. If that answers your question, Bianca.
Yeah. Personally, I really like stuff that's creative problem solving. I'm sure many of us have worked in roles where we had some pretty tricky limitations, whether it was budget limitations, brand limitations, SME limitations, and I love kind of seeing when people get creative with that, which is not to say, once again, the entire program is going to be sessions like that. It's just a thing that I like, so you could get to know us both a little better. But we've already got some questions in the chat, so why don't we jump over to that?
Yeah, let's do it.
See.
In there.
First question is from Shayla. She asked, what type of proposals are you looking for? It's a pretty broad question.
Yeah, it is. We can go in a lot of directions when we answer that one. Let me begin. I think obviously you have to remember, if you've never been to an event before, or if you have been to one of the Guild's events before, you know, our focus is on educational technology and solutioning in that realm. So it's sometimes easier to talk about like what's probably also not going to be a good session proposal for us. And typically, you know, if it's something like face-to-face training, that area, that's not one area we'll be looking to add to the program. That's not the space that we're talking about. So yeah, to answer the next question that came up, what topics to avoid? That's one. We're not face-to-face. You hear my wind howling, by the way? Really
Mark's out of Syracuse and I'm out of Toronto, Canada, and we both got some special weather happening today.
Yeah, I apologize if it gets really loud. Yeah. That's what's really going on here. So what makes a good proposal? A couple of things come to mind real quick is, you know, do you have, for example, we segment the proposal into two big pieces in the paragraph form. And I'll just say, like, it usually starts with understanding and helping people understand there's a challenge, a problem to be solved. In that first paragraph, we ask for, is there an industry level challenge that's going on, a personal problem to be solved? And then the second part looks at, how are you going to address that in your session? You know, what are you going to do to help people understand how to overcome said challenge through whatever technology solution or whatever strategic solution you would have. That's a nice structure, I think, for writing a good proposal. Bianca.
Digging in a little deeper, because we were also asked, is it only data and research that we're looking for, or also reflections, methods tried, proof of concept? Yeah, eLearning Guild conferences, so DevLearn, Learning Solutions, Realities 360 are very much about practical application. That's not to say stuff that touches on theory isn't welcome, but our attendees are really keen on, well, how do I do the thing? So yeah, absolutely. Reflections, case studies, as Mark mentioned earlier, methods tried. If you're comfortable, methods tried that didn't work too. Like, you could do a session about how you got to a solution and talk about the stuff that didn't go well along the way too. A lot of practical application of leveraging tools, of learning strategy. DevLearn has a bit more of a lean towards cutting or bleeding edge tech. So there's a bit more room for sessions that are about, here's some tech that's probably going to be coming your way in the next few years. Let me help you wrap your brain around it. All of our events have session tracks, and those tracks are sort of the big themes that we want to cover at the event. I strongly recommend checking out the tracks from last year's DevLearn. That can give you some really good ideas on directions to go with your sessions.
Are you getting questions sent directly to you, Bianca, or to everyone? Are you seeing
To everyone.
Okay, I want to make sure we're seeing all the same questions.
Yeah. So we've got Jessica and Tyler asked, can you take your topic and apply it across several different presentation types? So BYOD, workshops, 45 minutes, etc.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been many times where somebody has submitted a workshop and a similar concurrent. I wouldn't say it should be an identical cookie cutter approach across this, but you can have a kind of a, if you submit it as a workshop, you know that's going to be broader, that's going to be a full day, it's going to go a lot deeper. Whereas a piece of that might be good as a session topic. A portion of that could be leveraged there. And also the 45-minute sessions you're referring to there are like our stage sessions. The environment there is in our vendor hall. And therefore you have a different environment for it. So you have to think a little bit about how you might want to design for that particular environment when it's, you have a little bit larger of a crowd potential in those sessions, which is great. But at the same time, it can be a little bit louder and a little bit harder to do some interactivity with attendees. So there is definitely, I wouldn't say don't do it, but I also just be careful of the nuances of the context and not going, too deep into a concurrent session that you would cover in a workshop, let's say.
Yeah, and one thing I would say that Mark and I sometimes notice when we go through the proposals is someone will submit the exact same wording for a full day workshop, a 1 hour concurrent session, and a 1 hour BYOD session. And I really recommend writing specific proposals for the type of a session or workshop that you're attempting to do, because they do have different parameters, and we're looking for things that'll best take advantage of the time length or the hands-on component of the different kinds of sessions. For those of you who might not be familiar with the term that we're using, BYOD is bring your own device. So these are hands-on sessions. The goal with them is that the vast majority of either the full session, if it's an hour-long session, or the full workshop, is going to be someone's going to be spending hands-on, making a thing, trying out a tool, whether that's on a computer, a tablet, or a smartphone.
I feel like I'm gonna blow away.
Yeah. You've got ghosts, Mark. Ghosts.
It's really loud. I'm glad nobody's picking up on it. I want to address Jessica and Tyler's got a couple other questions in there.
Yeah.
Second one on there was, do you have to be a certified to teach the workshop? No, you don't. Obviously, if you're teaching a workshop, if you're doing a workshop and you're looking at 8 hours, it's a really deep dive. You have to learn multiple segments to build kind of like really a deeper skill set. So you really gotta know your stuff that deeply to carry it through. And how many proposals can one submit? We love that question. There's not really a number, right? You can't say that somebody should only submit 3. We do see this though, and I think Bianca would agree, is you start to see 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and what ends up happening is those first ones that come through the queue are pretty powerful, and then later in the game, the ones that come through are like, uh-oh, these are getting kind of weaker. They're not as full of detail as we'd like to see. That's one of the weaknesses. But I don't want to say there's a magic number. I think you can definitely submit more than one. If you have a lot of different sweet spots that you think will bring value, you should do that. But we're not looking at it from the point of view a lot of times of saying, oh my God, it's the 8th one. What are they up to? But, it might lend itself to say, well, are they just loading the rifle with buckshot, I like to say, and trying to hit some type of target? And that does send a kind of a bad signal. Bianca, what do you think?
Yeah, unlike some other events, we don't actually have a limit. So like Mark said, we could submit as many as you'd like. I do recommend that if you have more than one good idea, especially for something like DevLearn, submit more than one proposal, because what'll sometimes happen is we'll get some topic will be very popular this year. We can't always, predict what that'll be. Mm-hmm. So we might get 5 or 6 other really amazing proposals on that same topic you submitted on if you only submit one proposal, and we don't have space for them all. But if we see someone who has a really good proposal and we're like, oh, I wish we could have this person too, I wonder if they submitted something else. And it kind of breaks our heart when we go, they only put in one proposal. I would make space for them for something else. So, you know, 2 to 4 really solid proposals that you're super proud of tends to be a good number, but not a rule. If you really only have one good idea right now, submit that good idea. It's absolutely better than nothing. And if you have a few more good ideas, just make sure you have the time to build a really strong proposal, because there's a lot of competition.
Yeah. We got a lot of submissions, and we'll talk a little bit. And we'll go through all these questions. I
Yeah.
definitely want to address all these. I know. Joe Garcia asked up there, is there stuff that's been overdone or topics to avoid? One topic that we definitely say avoid is those things that are unsupported by science. So things like learning styles is not something we're going to allow to be on the program. So touching on that in some way is kind of a big no-no, and I would avoid things like that. Other things to consider are, kind of those HR type topics that we see sometimes around maybe like personality styles, or that type of research is not typically in the Guild's wheelhouse. Bianca, anything you want to add?
Another thing to avoid is going super niche. Sometimes what we'll see happen is someone will come in potentially with a case study or an example that is very, very, very specific to their specific world. So let's say someone is working in banking specific to credit card training, and they make a whole session about how to train for credit card training. Chances are we're not going to have a ton of people at our event who's going to continue to do that exact same training. So whenever you have something like that, it's not an absolute no-go, but look at ways you can open up the topic instead. So maybe it's not, what you learned from this project isn't just applicable to credit card training. I mean, it's any kind of training for people who have to work on the phones. And so as much as you can make the description sound like it could have a larger audience, and spell that out. I mean, you are technically writing for us, but really you're writing for a potential attendee, and you don't want to have them guessing if something's the right fit for them. So spell out how it could fit in other worlds as well.
That's really good advice. It reminds me sometimes too, we get, there'll be a lot of people in the medical field, who work in a hospital setting, and they'll talk to in their submission to that audience. And like Bianca was hinting to, sometimes that audience is really small. We need to speak to a broader audience. So again, it's a way of looking at that and saying, how can I extend this, knowing that I'm going to have a diverse group of people potentially coming to my session, that I can speak to all of that, take that initial idea or that solution I had in one setting and make it valuable for other people.
And really, if you're having trouble figuring out what that balance is of applies to enough people but doesn't sound too generic, seriously, that's something that reach out to me or Mark. We're happy to help you out with that. All right, next question. Melissa Shuster asked, I've done quite a few presentations and training, but none that have been recorded. Would a story behind the history of the model meet the presentation example need? I'm not entirely certain what you're asking, Melissa. Can you go into a little bit more detail in the chat for that for us? We're going to move on to the next question. We'll jump back to that.
Yeah, we'll see it come up.
Joe asked, if we presented at DevLearn before, should we note that as part of the application? You do not need to.
Nope.
We have a sense of who's been at the event before. We also make an effort to have new speakers on the program as well. We aim for about 20% new speakers to make sure that we're giving new people an opportunity to have their first presentation, and then that leaves about 80% of the rest for people who have some speaking experience as well. And that number, it's not exact every single time. Sometimes it's a little bit more on the new speakers. But we took questions about previous experience out of the call for proposals, in part because we were finding that new speakers were finding it made them feel like, oh, I haven't spoken before, I'm not ready for this. And we definitely didn't want any of our questions in the call for proposals to turn off new speakers or make people feel like they weren't ready yet.
Yeah, and to add to that too, I think sometimes with that question, it might signal to a speaker who has spoken before, like, oh, if I say I've done this before, maybe that excludes me if I've been on the circuit before. And it doesn't. We're looking straight up at the content and what value you could bring. We know our audience really, really well. and we want to make sure we're providing the best content for the conference itself. So that question went away. Like Bianca said, we really do for new speakers. You know, we look at that 20%. We often go over the 20%.
Mm-hmm. All right, and Fred's got a great question about when we're talking about particular products. Is there such a storyline? Is there any concern or consideration that needs to be given to the vendor? Here's the thing. I think if you submit a proposal that's trash talking a particular product, that's not great because, I mean, people use that product. That's not helpful for them. But if you were submitting something about storyline and you talked about some of the challenges with using it, as well as some of the amazing things you can do with it, it's perfectly fine, perfectly balanced. It's not something that you have to check by a vendor if you're going to do something related to a product. They're usually pretty happy to see practitioners sharing about their products and sharing about how they use them. Just don't let it be a commercial for the event or basically a replication of what you could find out on that product website. Have it be something like, hey, here's how you use Storyline to do this kind of a project, or here are some neat ways I found for using this video editing product, something like that.
I have nothing to add. That's a perfect. Let's see. Just looking through the questions, guys.
Yeah. I've got one about a resource that breaks down the type of sessions you're trying to fill and the time per type of session. So we have a downloadable Word document of the proposal questions. And one of the very, very first questions is the type of session you're proposing. So there are 4 types you can submit. 2 of them are workshops. So one is just a general workshop. No one has to bring any equipment with them, and it is a full day. So 8:30 to 4:30, Mark, is that right? That sounds right.
With,
the workshops.
Yes.
Yep. Then there's the BYOD workshops. BYOD workshop just means someone's going to have to bring some kind of equipment in order to do it, usually a laptop, a tablet, or a smartphone. There's room in the proposal to go into more detail about what people need to bring. When you're doing BYODs, make sure it's a thing people would have easy access to, or that there's a free demo version. The more niche, the more expensive a tool is, the less widespread it is, the harder it is for us to justify a BYOD on it. And then there's the 2 kinds of 1-hour sessions. So you can propose a 1-hour concurrent session. Once again, that's no one's expected to bring any devices, or you can propose a 1-hour BYOD, and that's bring something in. The room setups for BYOD are a little different. They're classroom style, so that there's room for someone to type or work, whereas the concurrent sessions are set up theater style. So that's sort of just generally the kind of session information that we give out in the proposal process. It also has the tracks. We allow you to self-identify what tracks you think it belongs to. So that's another way to sort of guide what you're ending up submitting as a topic in a session.
What I missed.
Genius. You missed genius. No, you missed logistics. But Mark, if you want to take the next question, I can get that Word document and pop a link to it in the chat pretty quickly.
Sure. Where do we leave off? I see Becky has a question in here about a panel. Is that where we're at?
Yeah.
Okay, so Becky, that's a really great question. Becky's asking, if you're not seeing it real quick, is, you know, a great idea for a panel, can add the names later. Well, we love panels. We build them ourselves a lot. We like ideas for panels, but a lot of times what we do is we like to know well in advance who those panels will be, and you probably guess why. Sometimes somebody might come forward and go, I got this great idea for a panel, the topic sounds wonderful, and then they list out all the panelists. And let's say all the panelists for this are all from the same company, or all the panelists are of a certain vendor group, or all the panelists are male or female. You know, so the idea is we like a lot of diversity, like a lot of different opinions and ideas. I like to say in this conversation that submitting an idea for a panel is great, but we would probably, you know, want to look closer at that without a determination of saying yes or no right off the bat. It's kind of wishy-washy response, and I apologize, because some great ideas come in, but without knowing those panelists, it does put it on the back burner as a potential idea.
All right, and Shayla asked about the attendees. So let's get into it. Who are the people who come to DevLearn? So as you can imagine, a lot of people in learning in some way, or learning or training. So instructional designers from like an individual practitioner perspective, e-learning designers and developers. We have a lot of people who are in management and, upwards through executive level learning strategy roles. So we have sessions that cover things from an individual practitioner making a thing to someone at the highest level in a learning department making the learning strategy for an entire company or organization. So you've got some good range of people to reach out to with your session idea. That's the nice thing about DevLearn. It's larger, and so we have a lot of range. They do tend to be people who are, like I said earlier, looking for practical advice. I don't know that we have a particular age range that it's really narrow on, because we've got everyone from people just starting out in their careers to people who have been enrolled for 30 to 40 years. I'm trying to think of anything else about DevLearn attendees a person might want to know.
No, I think generally, like you said, I think again it goes back to one of the first comments I made. Our events focus on ed tech, the technology aspect of it. People are very intrigued and want to be in that particular space. But like Bianca said, we're going to have from the very junior developer to somebody who just focuses on e-learning, all the way up to executive level folks, managers. So people are interested in management and strategy type topics. It's a good way to look at it. We do list that on the website as far as, the kind of the who's who for those people who attend. That's always a good way to look at it. I would also argue is take a look at the last programs we've done and see the nature of the sessions that have been on the program. It's a great way to see, what makes it on the program because who it speaks to.
And I will say, those of you who have never spoken at our event, our attendees are really nice. They're very supportive. I mean, the first time you speak anywhere, you're always kind of nervous about what are the people going to be like. And I mean, there are people in learning who are super nerdy and enthused about being there, and they want you to succeed. So if you're starting out speaking, this is a nice place to start. You have an audience that's really supporting you.
Let's see here. We have a question about vendor. Okay, if you aren't a vendor, can you submit for the expo hall? That's an interesting question, because the expo sessions, the sessions that happen on our stages, are 45 minutes in length versus 60 on the broader program. So you can't necessarily submit to be just on the expo hall. You can't submit and say, I want to be here. We make a determination. Obviously, we look at all the programs, sessions that come in and determine what best fits where. You might design it in a way that says this speaks to like being on a stage session, and that'll help us determine that, but there's no way of necessarily designating I want to be on a stage or I want to be in. We're going to make that determination through the content.
Yeah, the stage sessions are pulled from the concurrent session submissions. We have a question asking, when do we notify if someone has been accepted or not accepted? And yes, we always notify you either way. We will not ghost you. You will find out. It takes Mark, David, and I a few months to read through all the proposals, sort through everything. We typically will have somewhere in the 800 to 900 proposal range. We read them all, each and every one of us. There's no data sorting. And so it takes quite a bit of time to read them and give them the attention they need. We individually review them. Then we compare and contrast our reviews, and the things that we think are strong bets then go into our actual session planning meeting where we all meet up together. As you might have noticed, Mark and I are not in the same location. We're also not in the same country. But we do get together in person to plan out the program. It's one of those things that works a little better analog. That's when we take all the sessions that we thought were really good fits for the event, do a balance of topics, new to experienced speakers, angles on topics, vendors versus sole practitioners versus consultants. We try to have a good range of sources and angles on topics. And so that process takes quite a bit of time. So if you submit now, the call for proposals ends on March 6th. You'll expect to hear back from us probably early June. But you will definitely hear back. And if you submit something and you don't hear back by then, first check your spam filter. Unfortunately, some of the notifications get stuck there. And then reach out to us if there's nothing in your spam filter and you're wondering what happened.
Let's see here. Joe asks, first timer and wanting to try, how would I submit a proposal? Am I sending you my presentation speech? No, obviously there's a link to submit. It's a form that you would complete, and which provides us every bit of detail we need to make that decision in that. So you could send it there. Though, you know, Bianca and I do this all the time too. If you have a particular idea or something you want to bounce off us in advance, we're happy to give you some feedback there. You know, it's a quick email to us at the programs@elearningguild.com email. We can get that and give you some feedback. The thing we won't do, however, is answer an email that says, hey, what topics are you guys looking for? Because we don't know, right? So it's not a matter of, geez, we'd like to see X on the program, because we're getting submissions all the time during this period. We can't answer a question of that nature. It's better that you focus on your experience and your skills and background and submit and speak to that.
And so I popped a link to the proposal form in the chat. You also probably would have gotten it if you got the email about this event. We've been sharing the link on social media. If you can't find it somewhere, just message one of us. We'll get you taken care of. But it's a pretty easy form. We've done a lot of work over the years to try and streamline it, and also to use the questions to guide you to making the best proposal that you can.
Chris has a question in here. Did you want to take that one first?
Yeah. So Chris, it looks like you're asking about not specific to learning and development traditionally, but skills that if you're in learning and development or in business whatsoever, you might use, like project management or managing your day. We do accept proposals on that for DevLearn. We don't have a lot of session slots for those topics, but we do usually have a few sort of professional development sessions at the event. So yeah, go forward with something that's professional development.
Veronica, yes, I think we answered this already. We will notify you because we want you to be there. So if you've been accepted, we will tell you've been accepted because we really kind of want you to be there.
And if you don't get accepted, one thing to note is we always give you a little bit of general feedback about some of the reasons why a proposal might not be accepted, but we also recommend reach out to us. You'll get an email that gives you the status. You'll get some contact information. We will set up a call or a Zoom chat like this, or just an email back and forth with you to give you some specific feedback if you'd like it. A lot of people don't take us up on that, so we're happy to give the time to the people who do.
Let's see here.
I've got one from Bram where he asks, if you were going to show examples of e-learning types, do they have to be in English? I think it depends on what you're using the examples for. If you're briefly showing a few examples, if it's for the visual design, if the people in the audience don't necessarily have to understand the content and to understand your takeaway from it, I can't see that being a problem. I would say the DevLearn audience is an English-speaking audience. The event is in English. So you just want to make sure that if someone only speaks English, they can still get the context of what you want to take away from their example.
Good. I agree. And Brian says there's a searchable list of previous sessions. No, there's not. You can. but yeah, go ahead.
But I can put a link in the chat of the program from the 2019 event. Yeah. And that's a really fantastic place to start.
Yeah. And also just remember, Brian, too, is that, you know, we do have tracks. Everything falls under a track. It makes it easier for people when they're choosing sessions. Sometimes looking at those tracks is a good way to indicate the direction to go and where your particular proposal might fit within. Okay, there's that. So Becky asks here, if your audience is executives, will the submission also be considered for the executives pre-workshop? No, if you're designing a session for a workshop, you think in that frame of mind first. We wouldn't see a topic coming through as a concurrent session and say, oh, this would make a great workshop. We should move it over to the workshop. It has to be, you know, obviously constructed that way for that particular setting. It's a workshop session or it's a concurrent session.
And Becky, I'm wondering if you're talking about the executive forum?
I think so.
So the executive forum is a one-day workshop that we do for people at the executive level. It is not programmed through submissions. Although if we see a submission come in and we're like, oh, this person might have something interesting to share at the executive forum, we might reach out to them and talk about something custom for that event. But that one is done, programmed internally.
So
And Christine,
yeah.
thanks for saying that it was an amazing conference and you went last year and enjoyed it. So thank you.
I'm seeing Kristen saying it's the one conference for the year, and you know we'll take all these accolades.
Yeah.
Can you briefly? This is interesting.
Yeah.
Can you briefly describe a presentation that positively sticks out for you? What did the person do to make an impact? Do you have one, Bianca? Do you we don't get, sadly, Bianca and I are running around like crazy at the events. We don't jump into a ton. We get snapshots sometimes, but I'm sure there's something that rings true for you.
Well, and for those of you who don't know us, Mark and I were Guild conference attendees and Guild conference speakers long before we ever started working for the Guild. So I've seen a lot of sessions just from that time of my life as well. I think something that I really like in presentations is the opportunity for the audience to participate in some way. And, like this is going to vary because depending on your topic, but even just little questions to the audiences or audience time for input. I've seen people use polling software. I've seen people just use a show of hands. Audiences at our conferences like to be actively engaged. I know this isn't the case for all conferences, and there's nothing wrong with that either, but just so you know what a DevLearn audience is looking for. So think about ways to put in little parts for the audience to share their knowledge or share their thoughts throughout your presentation.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in too. This one always stuck in my mind. It was a great presentation a couple of years ago. And his name's Eric. I don't want to give away his stuff, but he did a great job. He had a case study. I mentioned in the beginning, I had a case study session. And honestly, about 25 minutes into it, after he breaks down the rationale, what they were doing and the approach they took and this and that, he came out and basically shared that it failed. And through that, he also then went the next 20 minutes going into what they learned through that particular process and really engaged, as Bianca said, the audience in back and forth dialogue about what could have been or done differently forward. It was a great learning experience. It was just really sincere in its approach, and I like that a lot.
Yeah, I think that sincerity is a huge thing. I mean, you're talking to an audience that is people who are doing the same work you are. It's, people just like you. So this doesn't have to be super formal. You don't have to put a lot of emotional distance between you and the audience. You're in the same kind of work as they are. You can have conversations at that level. I think it's really nice. So we've got a question from Mark. I'm thinking about doing a hands-on session about more advanced storyline functionalities. If I want to skip the basics and assume the audience is ready to dive deeper, is that an issue?
Not an issue for me.
Yeah, I think you just want to make it really clear in your session description that this is for a more intermediate advanced audience, sort of the people who are ready to take the next step. Yeah. What you're trying to do is if someone reads the proposal or reads the description or reads the title and they're a beginner, you want them to know enough to self-select out and know, oh, this isn't right for me. Because the last thing you want is for someone who has never gotten their hands on Storyline or whatever tool you're teaching to come in and go, oh, can you show me how to turn it on? So just clarity in the description. We have a mix of more beginner tool sessions and more intermediate advanced, so perfectly good fit for DevLearn. Yep,
agreed. Bianca just said something I'll throw out there. It's not been asked yet over here. About title. About titling things and being very appropriate about it. And I think that's really, really important. Sometimes they don't read beyond the title. We have to admit, you may not, as people are listening to this, you might see a title and go, that session I'm going to, without reading the description. So sometimes you have to assume that people will only see the title. So be as clear as possible in that title, as you can in terms of what people are going to experience. If you're talking about video production, mentioning video production in the title is probably a really good idea. So just keep that in mind as you're putting together a proposal.
Mark's pet peeve is titles that are clever, but you can't tell what the session is on from it. Where it's like really interesting wordplay, but you're like, I don't know what this is going to be.
Yeah, no, it can catch your eye, But it can also be like if a person is, now I got to dig deeper into the description. I'm doing that in addition to planning my whole event. That might be a put off.
Yeah.
So it's just something to consider. Be careful in your titling.
I will say this, if you submit a really fantastic proposal and the title doesn't quite work, that won't prevent it from being accepted. We will just work with you and shift up the title a little bit. So you don't have to worry too much about that.
What we got here?
Joe's asking about the theme for the conference this year, and does it matter if proposals are on theme or if they ought to be geared towards a certain theme? We don't really have a theme for DevLearn that changes every year. It really is just about that intersection of learning and technology, and just trying to have sessions that are playing in that space or are useful for someone who is playing in that space.
Yeah, DevLearn tends to be, as you probably pick up on, we do lean a little in the future in terms of, things that are emerging as topics go. So those are always very welcome for DevLearn.
Yeah. Bram asked a question I love. I swear, Mark, I did not pay Bram to ask that question.
You are Bram. Go ahead.
So Bram mentions that it's hard to choose a session or track based on just the short title and description. And is it possible to get a short video ad or something to get people enthusiastic? We do allow our speakers to do short session trailers. We recommend around 30 seconds to just quickly describe the session, to pique people's interest and to get to know you as a speaker. If you are still one of our speakers, we send out an all call for those. And if you submit one, we post it on your session description. We also share it on the eLearning Guild social networks. So yes, please make video trailers. We love them.
Yeah, we definitely focus as being kind of a platform for our speakers, and we support you in every way possible. And it's, we want to partner with you on promotion of your session as best we can. We'll give you ideas and tips, and we'll do our own promotion. But if you're socially engaged, it's an opportunity for you to also kind of let people know what you're doing and why you're doing it, and that's really a draw for people. What do we got here, Bianca?
If it's a proposal is submitted and accepted, what happens if some details change along the way? And yeah, that happens.
It does. It does happen. What happens typically is we'll get a session. We do some, Bianca, myself, David, once we get it, we review it. If it's been accepted onto the program, we might make some tweaks in it. Maybe it's, some things in the title, as Bianca mentioned before, we'll make some changes there. But we're never after changing the overall message. It just might be some, what we call GPS, right? Some grammar, punctuation, spelling things will get changed in editing. Once that's online and you have access to see it out there and you say, ooh, something needs to change, or I don't agree, or whatever, then that's the time to let us know. I will caution, however, a complete departure from your initial submission is a red flag. You have to stay to the core of your session. If there's minor changes being made, maybe you're going to add another tool into the conversation or something like that, that's completely acceptable. But you can't flip it, completely for us once you're accepted.
Yeah, and what happens sometimes, especially with sessions that are about tools, is an update is made to the tool and you did not have psychic powers and did not know that was going to happen. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes that will impact your description. It's very easy to just reach out to us, let us know the tiny change. Usually that's pretty easy if it's a small change, or you say, hey, the functionality in the tool I submitted just changed, or they released an update. Pretty simple. I have a few questions from LinkedIn. From some people who couldn't be here. So Jonathan Hill was asking, he wanted to understand how much detail you needed in a proposal.
I like that question.
I also did not pay Jonathan to ask this question either. This is a really big pain point sometimes for Mark and I with proposals, is detail.
Yeah, I mean, I would err on the side of more detail is better, so we understand, especially detail in terms of what you're going to bring to the learner in the session, the attendee in your session, in terms of overcoming that challenge or that problem that you introduced to us. So providing that, I just say err on the side of more than less. The problem with less, of course, becomes we look at it and go, either two things are going to happen. Yeah. I don't really know where they're going with this. Or we run into a situation like, is this going to be 45 minutes to 60 minutes? Is there enough in here to happen?
we've made some adjustments to the proposal questions themselves to try and encourage people to provide more detail. Because what sometimes happens is we'll read a proposal, it's incredibly vague and generic about what specific techniques or approaches or skills will be learned. Someone might say, I'm going to teach you how to edit video. And we're like, okay, what steps? And so it kind of breaks our heart where we're like, this could potentially be interesting, but I don't have enough detail here to understand what this person's unique take is on the topic or what specifically will be covered.
Yeah.
The thing that I've been telling people a lot lately is treat your session proposal like the worst movie trailer ever. And you know what those trailers are like? You're sitting in your seat, you're eating your popcorn, you watch the trailer, it tells you every key story beat. And by the end of the trailer, you're like, well, I've seen the movie now, I don't need to go see it. The opposite is true with the proposal. You actually want to tell us your core story beats of your session so we can really deeply envision what the session would be, if it would be a fit for our attendees, and how it would fit into the mix of all the other sessions we might have. So think worst movie proposal.
I love it. It's a great way to look at it. It's great.
And Jonathan also asked what's provided on site and what do presenters need to bring themselves?
Okay. All right. Well, we take care of your microphone. You'll have that available to you from us. We don't have anything like podiums or things along those lines. Obviously, a projector and a screen is available for our standard. Your own laptop is required. So if you're displaying information, your slide deck, you're going to have to bring that or whatever device you're going to use to display. What am I not thinking of, Bianca?
Cables. So for the Mac people here, hi, I'm one of you. You want to make sure that you have whatever dongle is necessary to connect your computer to an HDMI output that it can connect to our projectors. We will sometimes have a few of those on hand for emergencies, but I strongly recommend bring your own. That way you know it works. But yeah, so what you get in the room is the room setup. You get a roof. It's very exciting. You get the projector, place to plug in, but you are responsible for bringing your own device to present off of. Also, if you have one of those little slide clickers, we'll have them to give out at times, but it's nice to have your own. I don't know. I'm really nerdy about that. It makes me happy.
Yeah, you're better off having some of those things already, available.
And Bram asked if there's secret speaker Wi-Fi. Ooh, wouldn't that be cool? There's not.
There's not.
We spend a lot of money on getting the most robust Wi-Fi we can get in that building. And it tends to work really well for your standard presentations. I would say if you need video, download it to your device, play it directly from your device. Don't depend on streaming video. That's the one caveat I'd have.
Yeah, that goes too. We talk about that a lot. I mean, our tech team, our logistic team on site, they do a great job with the hotel to ensure this. Knock on wood. I mean, that's obviously anytime you're dealing with technology, and especially with Wi-Fi, we run into glitches. We have that same conversation with Demo Fest. If people are presenting at Demo Fest, if you haven't heard about Demo Fest, by the way, it's coming up in terms of the close of the CFP. But having that as a local copy available, so you're not having to go out, is always a wise move.
And if you have AV troubles, we do have AV staff on hand to help you fix them. They'll be around to your room before you start presenting. So you are not responsible for being your own tech support.
Yep. And there's people from the guild itself and volunteers that we have associated with the guild who, pop their head in, check in, make sure you have what you need. If not, they're going to be that person who's going to grab that AV tech and get your situation solved. Let's see, Kristen.
Yeah.
For those who have spoken before, how much do you like to see iteration of previous sessions, slightly different topics, totally different topics? Oh, good question.
Yes. Yeah. It's the answer.
I grow and change. Yeah, go ahead, Bianca.
Yeah. I think what we don't want to see is a presenter doing the exact same topic at every single event, ours and competition included, until the end of time, because people notice. It's not that everyone can go to every conference, but people will be like, oh, well, I saw Bianca give that presentation 2 years ago. Doesn't she have anything new? Doesn't look, not the greatest look on you. It's not the greatest look on us. That's not to say you have to reinvent the wheel every year, but I think iterations, variations on similar topics is great. Like some of you might know that I play in the visual design space, but I have different talks that I do regarding visual design that have a different angle on building those skills. And yeah, if you're someone who has been known for talking about a certain topic and you want to grow, please submit something on a completely different topic. You might want to reach out to us and tell us a little bit about how you've moved into that space, because sometimes we'll be like, Mark wants to submit on microlearning. What?
Had to go there, didn't you, Bianca?
I did. Or Bianca wants to submit something on complex coding.
There you go.
I mean, it wouldn't be something that I was known for doing, or that you would go, Bianca knows anything about this. I might, but I might secretly. This happens where people have skills that we didn't realize they had, or interests that they've started building. Perfectly happy to have that as well.
Good stuff.
Yeah. So I think our questions are starting to wind down. Mark, do you have, let's do one last big takeaway.
Okay.
If someone's doing this.
Yeah, let me think about that for a second. There's a couple I've always pondered. We have a series of videos too, so if
Yes.
people know, that'll help you think through this.
Look at eLearning Guild on YouTube, and the video series is called Preventable Proposal Missteps. They're very, very short, and they will help you see some of the most common missteps we see that we think are incredibly easy to fix before you submit.
Mm-hmm. Let me ponder. Do you have one
All
off
right,
the top of your
I
head?
got one. Yeah. So speaking of resources, Mark, myself, and some other people on the team have been putting together proposal writing resources for the last while now. We've been sharing them on social media constantly. So if you're looking for more support, follow the DevLearn account on Twitter or on LinkedIn, or the eLearning Guild account on Facebook. I think we have a DevLearn account there too. And we'll be sharing those resources throughout the next few weeks. They're things like the Word document of all the proposal questions that I shared with you earlier, articles from other speakers on how to get started, advice on what we're looking for, the video series that Mark mentioned. There's lots of really great support out there. Oh, and us, reach out to us. Mark and I are pretty easy to find.
Yeah, it's programs at elearningguild.com. That gets sent to the team, which includes myself, Bianca, and Rihanna. And then depending on where we're at in our workflow, one of us will be able to jump in and add that in. I think another thing in terms of resources and preparing and going in, you're going to be eager to submit a proposal, but there is a Word document of the proposal form. And I would argue, like, take that down and build your proposal first there, so you can kind of shoot holes in it yourself and get everything fine-tuned, then go in. I mean, God forbid you have a tech glitch and you're halfway through a proposal and lose everything. And it's better to get it down, refine it a little bit, and then submit.
Yeah, well, thank you all so much for coming out here. Those were fantastic questions.
Great.
And I'll finish this off by saying, reach out. If you have any questions that we didn't get to answer, or you start working on your proposal and something new comes up, we are happy to answer your questions.
Yep, we are available. Thanks for coming.
All right, have a great day, everyone.